Hi, I'm Tony Ehrbar. Our featured guests today are Brent Nussbaum, Kristi Reiherzer, and Brian Coughlin of SIOEN. And now let's talk textiles. Welcome to another episode of Talking Textiles. I'm your host, Tony Ehrbar, CEO of Renegade Plastics and American Tent. I also serve on the ATA Board of Directors. The goal of this podcast is get to know the wide variety of positions and markets that make the advanced textile world turn. We'll be talking to professionals in different roles throughout the series to help inspire the next generation of textile professionals and anyone interested in learning about others' journey in the world of textiles. ATA offers advanced textile content through the year, including the upcoming Advanced Textile Expo 2025, taking place in November 4th through the 7th in Indianapolis. Visit textiles.org/events to learn more. Today, we're diving into how businesses in the textile industry are adapting to evolving global dynamics, tariffs, supply chain risks, and the growing interest in reshoring and nearshoring. This is a conversation that hit home for many of us, especially as we navigate rising costs, logistical uncertainty, and increasing pressure to build more resilient operations. I'm joined by three outstanding industry leaders who are living this every day. Brent Nussbaum of Miller Weldmaster, Kristi Reiherzer of Shade Industries, and Brian Coughlin of SIOEN. I'll start by asking each of you to briefly introduce yourself, your name, company, and your role, and maybe tell us in a sentence or two what's top of mind for you right now when it comes to sourcing, tariffs, and supply chains. Brent?
So I'm Brent Nussbaum. I'm president of Miller Weldmaster Corporation located here in Navarre, Ohio. We are a capital equipment manufacturer, so sourcing is high on everyone's mind right now. And we're just looking at what strategic partners we need to maintain alignment with, and what partners that we're able to maybe look at some other solutions right now.
Brian?
Brian Coughlin with SIOEN Coating, and I also represent St. Clair Textiles, which is a sister company to SIOEN, and located in the Seattle area, but our production is all done in Europe, so Belgium and France. I think the things that most concern me are the flame-resistant ingredients, so raw materials and sourcing for those raw materials is the most challenging part. And then obviously what we're here for is the tariff mystery, which looks like it's starting to have a clearer picture for us at least.
Yeah, I was going to say Europe, was it yesterday that agreement was taking place? So
Yeah.
things slowly moving along on some of these. And then Kristi.
Good morning. Yes, I'm Kristi Reiherzer with Shade Industries out of Phoenix. I think the biggest struggle for us is just navigating the unknowns of what's coming with the tariffs. Just don't know what's going to hit and when, and kind of how to navigate that with customers that we have for long-term projects.
And then, as I said earlier, I'm Tony Ehrbar. I'm the CEO of Renegade Plastics and American Tent. As the name implies, American Tent, we make the big party tents. And then Renegade Plastics is a coated fabric that we use in a bunch of different applications. And my answer is, as Brian said, is uncertainty, just not knowing what's going to happen today versus tomorrow. There's just a lot of uncertainty. So I'm going to jump over to some questions about tariffs, and I'm going to have everyone answer these because I think it's going to be very different for each of you. So how have recent tariffs affected your company? And are there any particular materials or components that have been hardest hit for you? Brian?
Oh, thank you. Tariffs obviously went from the normal 4.2% duties to bring things into the United States. And then suddenly there was talks of tariffs and 20%, 30%. It kind of caused some knee-jerk reactions, or what are we going to do with pricing? But luckily it kind of settled on that 10% level for a little while. And so just kind of reacting to what the goods are costing to bring to North America, and then the challenge of deferring that cost onto our customers. And then raw materials, the antimony trioxide shortage or lack of supply globally, other than what came from China, has caused a number of other price increases that has had I'd say a larger impact than the tariffs have over the past year.
Yeah, and for those who don't know, same thing for us. Antimony is used as a fire retardancy agent, right? And it's a pretty small portion, but it can cause a big increase. It's gone up 1,000% over the last 2 years. It's also used in munitions and chips. And so it's the demand as well as China does mine a lot of antimony. So similar for us. Brent.
Yeah, so I mean, I think we're all going to kind of reiterate similar stories here a little bit, but as an equipment manufacturer, obviously majority of our components are purchased here in North America, but subsequently, obviously those are made all over the world. So we're starting to see that trickle in. We're starting to see different line items on our receivers when they show up with different tariffs applied to that. We have some strategic partners that we work with throughout the UK and Europe. And as of yesterday, that's starting to settle down a little bit. We were in a point, as most were a few months ago, that it was like you didn't even want to make a plan because by the time you finished the plan, the target had moved, right? And so we were all just in a sit and wait scenario. Now, the opposite end or the other side of the tariff struggle for us is as a very global company that exports about half of its equipment annually outside of North America. The struggle has become, I can't guarantee what the final price of that equipment is going to cost the end user. And, on a 15, 20, $30,000 machine, some companies are willing to take that risk, right? But when you're talking about automation, customized machines, and you're talking $200,000-$300,000 plus machines, a lot of companies aren't willing to take that risk right now to say, is it going to cost me an extra 10, 15, 20% to land that machine in my country? And that's the struggle we have on the opposite side of things from the retaliatory side of some of these tariffs. So
Yeah. And Brent, as capital equipment as opposed to what Brian and I might have at Renegade and SIOEN, how does that impact people's buying habits? Because not every piece of equipment is a need to have at that exact moment. So have you seen buying cycles?
yeah, yeah, it's a good question. What we see in our industry a lot is as people start to question the need for a new purchase, we start to see service and refurb and that side of our business really, really grow. And that's a common trend if you look over the years. And so we're seeing a lot of that, but we're also still seeing a lot of continued interest in automation because if you're going to reshore, if you're going to bring things back to the States and you want to remove some of those supply chains, let's face it, the way we're going to do that is by automating those processes.
Yep.
So.
How about you, Kristi?
Yeah, a lot of what we're seeing has to do, I mean, the hot points are hardware, fabric, steel, kind of like Brian was saying. We were hit early with that, hey, there's going to be a 25% increase, kind of waiting out when is that going to hit us? How is it really going to impact us? And of course, steel fluctuates anyway, so it's hard to nail it down. Is it because of tariffs or just natural market anyway? And so for fabrication wise, steel is a hot item for us. It's kind of like Brent was saying, it's a lot of tough conversations with our customers. Hey, when do you want to buy this? You can lock in today's price or just see what happens in a couple of months. And it's the same thing for the fabric and the hardware. A lot of it comes from overseas. And so we're definitely dealing with that, really figuring out the timelines and when to nail in a price.
Yeah. Yeah, as a fabricator, similar to us, so our 90% of what we source is American made. So I thought, oh, we'll be insulated. Well, my vinyl's up 12 to 17% because of antimony and a couple other items. And then aluminum and steel are our two biggest other raw materials. And so aluminum has seen 15 to 17% increase. And then there's the 25% tariff on aluminum. And then steel 20 to 25%. So my aluminum is all made here in Indiana and California. My steel stakes are all made in California, and that's 20 to 25% plus there's that 50% additional tariff that gets added on. And then that 10% I do bring in from China just because of the can't find a competitive supplier here. We had a container on the water, and most of the tariffs, as long as you get it on the water before the tariff, it's tariffed at the old rate. Well, the steel tariff just went into effect, and who cares where it was? It was at port. And so on the water, 50% tariff was added. And so we got the bill, and I believe, I don't remember the exact words my controller used, but it started off a very dire email, and I'm like, oh my God, did someone die? But it was 50% tariffs were added that we weren't aware of. So on the tariff front, what has pricing looked like? Have you guys had to increase prices? And if you're willing to share, what percentage?
Yeah, so I'll go there. I guess if I can look back on a few silver linings that came out of COVID, I would say through that would be a bloated inventory. Going into all of this, we've been sitting on a heavier inventory since COVID, and since supply chain issues that we continued to maintain, obviously because we could. And so we've just really been slow playing this. As an equipment manufacturer, we just didn't say, okay, we're raising 11% or whatever it is. We strategically looked at what do we have inventory of? What can we, just because tariff is the hotbed now, I don't need to use that as an opportunity to try to make more margin on the equipment. What can we truly sell at an old rate, and what are we going to have to look at on, of some new rates? So it's really, it continues to be a weekly topic that we have here on what that looks like. So we did not go carte blanche and say this is an increase, because every line we do is affected differently.
Okay. And if you think about the elasticity for your customers, some of us on here sell, I'll say, more of a commodity one that there's lots of competitors for. There's not as many competitors in the welding space. And so
Right.
do you feel like a price increase is not going to have as big of an effect because there's not as many substitutes?
That's of course what we always have to consider, right? I believe on the more standard-ish type of equipment that we build, we have to be more cognizant of that. When we start looking at custom design solutions, we now start looking at what what items do you need on this machine? What items, so we really start piecemealing it to work on the final price, because when it comes to a custom solution, there's just not a list price on this, right? We build those to each customer's specifications. So we really find ourselves just through the engineering side and the design side of it is really trying to fit the budget of the customer based on that.
Ryan, how about you on the price side?
Well, on the price side, I think, and I'm maybe shooting a little bit from the hip, but at Miller, you guys are value adding your components stateside, whereas my product, it's essentially I'm importing it from Europe. There's no value add for me, and so all of those costs need to go somewhere. And so my tariff and antimony surcharges and everything that I've had to implement have not been diluted really at all. So all of those end up getting added back into the price to our customers, which is unfortunate and kind of makes me lose sleep at night knowing how prices have skyrocketed just for like a flame resistant product that you would use in a tent. A lot of those have gone up about 40% or more in the last 12 months. And we are still looking at another price increase here in not too long. So unfortunately, if anybody is listening, yes, it could be coming for FR materials. Hopefully it won't be too bad.
Right. And do you put things on your invoice? You mentioned a surcharge. Do you bake it into the price, or do you have an actual like surcharge below? And how does that, I mean, is there a psychology to that with customers?
I try not to. I think at least the what I've experienced with the American consumer or business person is they want the price to be the price. And so a lot of times I roll all those costs into the price, and that's what's on the invoice. Now when I bring something in from our factory in Europe where they're intercompany transactions, they have the price and then an antimony surcharge that gets applied to those FR materials. So we have the ability to do that for our customers if they want that separate, or if they want a tariff line to be separate on their invoice, we can do that. But a lot of times I just roll it all into the cost, and the final price is what is on the invoice.
Okay. How about you, Kristi, in terms of price increases?
Yeah, we've implemented some really small percentage increases just to help cover our bases. But for the most part, it's just having those conversations up front with our customers, saying there's a lot of unknowns in the economy right now. And so, we need to figure out how we share the risk, because we can't all of a sudden go under because we need to cover steel and fabric and hardware that is dealing with these either tough timelines or just tough price increases that we don't know are coming. We don't know how it's going to exactly impact us. So we've had a lot of good partnerships with the people we're working with, and so far it's worked out okay. But yeah, it's a lot of upfront, difficult conversations.
Yeah. Brian.
I'd say especially helpful things are an expiration date on a quote, which are a key point to make sure that we are doing as a salesperson, but letting people know that there is some uncertainty and we don't know exactly what's going to be the future. So if they're working on a project that couldn't be implemented until next year, there's a big asterisk there, as that pricing is likely to change.
Yeah. As a talented sales guy, how do you talk to customers about these price increases?
At the moment, I try to avoid those conversations, but just you got to be factual with them and let them know what the situation is, and try to get ahead of the conversation and do it as early in the process as possible, rather than a surprise at the end when it comes time to pay the bill. So it's really, really beneficial to be upfront and honest with the customers, and make sure that they have all the information as soon as you have the information.
Yep.
And then seek that information early in the process as the salesperson to lay that out to the customers along the way.
Makes sense. So our average price has gone up cost has gone up between 5 to 10% at American Tent. We've raised prices 5%, so we're still eating some of it, but we'll probably be looking at specific products and if we're able to competitively change prices, because our two biggest competitors are out of China. They still haven't raised their prices. I don't know how. It might be like Brent, where they just have a lot of excess inventory and they're trying to ride things out. But yeah, we put through a percent increase there. All right, well, shifting over to sourcing. So onshoring, nearshoring, diversification, if you will. So have you shifted sourcing or manufacturing to new regions because of tariffs or risk exposure? If so, which countries or regions? And I'll start quickly there. For me, it's really hard to know where to shift, as it takes time. And if something changes in 2 months and I've moved to Vietnam, and then all of a sudden Vietnam, like a lot of the companies back when the tariffs came in 2016 to 2020, made a choice to shift. And now that shift might actually not pan out positively. So for us, not too much, but anyone else have something to add there?
So yeah, Tony, I have a two-part answer to this question. Is, as a capital equipment, we have a lot of the components that go into our equipment. Those are parts that you can't just say, like, I'm no longer going to buy this, or I'm going to find a suitable counterpart for it, because a lot of these parts that we use currently, like these parts are ingrained in the DNA of our equipment, right? I can't just say that I'm going to use this PLC controller that I'm using to control the machine. I can't just say, well, I'm going to go find someone else. Like, that's we have the history with that machine, with that component. We know how to program it, we know how to support it, we know how to service it, we know how to get the most out of that. And I can't just say I'm going to go find a different suitable one. Obviously we do that through ongoing R&D efforts, throughout the year and so on, but just to say I'm going to switch suppliers right now would probably actually cost us more than what the tariff we're getting from our supplier would be on that part. So that's maybe my first answer to the question. The second would be that throughout all of this, we've been very blessed. We opened a facility in the Netherlands back in 2012. So we've really just been able to lean on that facility more. We're doing more manufacturing out of there. We're just being so much more strategic, as Europe is a big market for us. And knowing that if there are items that we do get duties on, and we've been going through it, and if you are selling outside of North America, and you can go through the extensive paperwork and everything that's involved with duty drawback to try to get some of that tariff money back if it does then leave North America. We've just strategically been looking at what more can we do in Europe than what we're doing today. And that's just kind of really driven more work and over, outside of North America to Europe.
Yeah, we've been focusing on how do we get to Canada, direct shipments to Canada, direct shipments to Mexico, out of Korea, for
Mhm.
Renegade Plastics. Anybody else on that question? Something to add on what Brent said?
We haven't changed suppliers. I mean, I think there's just that sense of loyalty, trying to stick to who we know and what we know, kind of like Brent is saying. There's probably more costs involved in trying to learn how to work with somebody new.
Mhm.
And also, they're probably dealing with similar issues. Anybody you go to is probably impacted somehow. So at least the people you're working with, you kind of know what they're dealing with as it stands. So for us, we haven't really been able to change anything, and it's been probably the best path for us.
One of the key points that our company has is contingency planning. So we're always kind of looking ahead to see, okay, if something happens, who can we rely on? So we try to spread out our reliability on suppliers for a lot of our raw materials so that in case there is something that happens, that we have a backup plan in place.
Yep. Which is a great lead into my next question, which is how are you planning when it's unclear what the next round of trade policy or even trade enforcement will actually look like? And so, in other words, how do you build a supply chain strategy when the rules could shift dramatically overnight?
Kind of a roll the dice, wait and see, just with the amount of changes that have gone on. So it really, a lot of it has to do with just try to be prepared for what new thing may happen. And we don't know what that is, and hopefully it's not going to be a huge impact.
Yeah. Has it changed forecasting for you going forward? Do you have a lot of different scenario forecasted out?
There's a lot of different scenarios forecast out. I thought I was going to have a larger impact on what my forecasted budget would be for the year, but I like to think that our company provides a premium product at a good value for our customers, and mostly it's been largely unaffected by all the price increases due to tariffs and other surcharges, along with exchange rates. So as the exchange rate changes, that also affects our prices. So I was expecting more of an impact, but I am kind of waiting to see what's going to happen in the third quarter to see what really pans out for the rest of the year.
Yeah, there's a lot of secondary and tertiary effects of tariffs. To your point, exchange rates are a big thing. Is anyone investing in onshoring or nearshoring to reduce cross-border volatility? And if so, what have been any challenges? I know, Brent, you said you had done some previously, but does anyone have any more thoughts about how they could do that? What it would even look like, or if you're thinking about it?
I've had a long time dream that our company would invest in a US based company and basically buy one of our competitors so that we could onshore some of our production to the US. But it's still to be determined and nothing to date as of yet.
Yeah. So for me, the problem with blanket tariffs is if you're trying to onshore or nearshore, and in our case, we had to buy a piece of equipment that was custom made. It had to be made in Korea. I still got tariffed on a piece of equipment I was trying to use to onshore a portion of some of our innovation and manufacturing capabilities, which was frustrating, certainly.
Yeah, I would say the onshoring efforts that we have here at Miller are more so helping our customers with those efforts is really, 20 years ago we were helping customers move overseas, and now we're helping some of those same customers move back.
All right, so let's talk about your supply chain resilience, some risk management questions. So Beyond tariffs, what are the biggest supply chain risks you're tracking today?
For us, it's definitely steel, hardware, that all basically comes from overseas for us down the chain, even some of the fabrics. So it's not so much what we're fabricating within the US, but where our fabricators and suppliers are getting their items from. Yeah, are they sitting out on the port waiting to be brought in, or just in that unknown of when will we deal with something that starts to cause delays or timing out tariffs and all that.
Just availability of raw materials. So how we're able to source or what the prices of those commodities are, and our ability to obtain what we need to fill our supply chain, and then the availability of the transportation to get it to and from all the different factory locations and warehouses that we have globally.
From a commodity standpoint, obviously steel and aluminum are the main structures on our machine, but they're a small portion of the cost that actually goes into the machine. So that isn't the biggest impact that we're seeing it on. It's more from an electronic side and things like that. We are noticing freight costs rising considerably again, and it's really just keeping an eye on that.
Kind of tied into all of that, I mean, going back to my forecast question, how are you guys tracking against your forecast for the year? Because a lot of people probably set their forecast in October or November last year. How are things going? And you don't need to give exact numbers, but are we tracking under or over forecast?
I'll say we've been tracking right at our forecast through the year so far, but we're cautiously optimistic for what the second half of the year is going to do.
Okay.
At least in North America. Globally speaking, it's about what we had forecasted, a little bit below. And the primary region for most of our sales is Europe, and that's tracking a little bit behind.
Yeah, I would say as far as Miller in North America, we're tracking almost at goal. Like we said, when some equipment sales is down, service and refurb is up, so that's kind of helped offset that. We're really excited about the Section 179 and what that's going to do. They've increased the limit on that and what you can capitalize in the same year period. So we're hoping that brings some traction here, Q3, Q4. Yeah, we'll wait and see how some of this plans out in this new bill.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think we're probably a little under where we want to be in terms of construction and sales. I think people are kind of hesitant to move forward, so they're holding back a little bit. We did have higher goals this year than last, even with all of the expected, unexpected issues. So we're right where we should be probably, but under what we were hoping for. And I think it's just all the hesitance.
Yeah, for us, the uncertainty in the first half of the year, we were under forecast quite a bit. We made up for it our busiest time of the year, if you think about tense summer, right? So April, May, and June, we were pretty close to forecast, but on the year, we're under where we had forecasted for the year. Have you built more redundancy, buffer inventory, or alternative suppliers into your networks? I know, Brent, you said that's tough on like a piece of electronics or an important component. You can't just switch over to someone because then you end up with a bunch of quality issues if it's not where you need it to be. But as you think about those items, anyone have any insight or experience?
Our steel fabrication is done in-house, so it kind of works to our benefit. It doesn't slow down, how we make production happen. But in terms of the fabric and who we get to fabricate shade sales and things like that, for us, we're loyal to the people that we work with currently. We've looked at what else is out there, but it kind of goes back to the previous conversation of, okay, does it cost more to try to work with somebody else, and how do you navigate what they're also dealing with, figuring out their unknowns and how that impacts us. So we haven't really changed much, but it's always a question not to put all of your eggs in one basket. How can you kind of navigate and get ahead of things?
Definitely having multiple sources for raw materials, and I think the unknown that looking for a new source is what is the cost of that evaluation to your business.
Mhm.
There is investment, research, You have your engineers that need to take a look at it and make sure that everything is up to snuff. And maybe that company isn't familiar with doing business with you, and they try to sneak in some subgrade materials on you. So definitely having trusted suppliers and multiple of them has been a contingency plan that SIOEN and St. Clair have used for years, and they've been able to negotiate contracts where we have certain supplies that we're able to get no matter what. So
Yep.
certainly protecting our supply and making sure that we're paying our vendors on time in order to get those things in-house at the right time.
Yeah. Yeah, Renegade, we rushed to beat some of the tariffs to get some things on the water, bringing in from Europe. I don't know if you did a little bit of that as well to try to beat some changes that you knew were coming.
Well, we always try to beat the summer shutdowns of the factories there. So
Europe.
certainly there is a stock up period, and then there's this time right now where nobody's in the office and not a whole lot happens in Europe. And then what will happen is we'll restock again for the end of the year, and then we'll be operating as normal again. So it certainly is times to build up in anticipation for some tariffs, and I think we're in one of those lull periods right now. We tried to beat a lot of that, in at least with our supply in North America.
Yeah. For those of you who don't know, Europe basically takes the month of August off, which I think is a great.
It's July and August.
Yeah, depending on the regions.
Yes.
All right, so why don't we talk a little bit around future outlook and then any advice you might have for those listening. So what's your company's outlook over the next 2 to 3 years when it comes to global sourcing? And I'll say for Renegade Plastics, we do bring in most of our materials from Korea right now. And so there is plans to onshore, which again, hopefully uncertainty comes down, we can better understand. We should be able to source a machine here, but that is something we are thinking about. A lot of that has to do with Berry Amendment and being able to sell into the military as well. But there are other, obviously, rationales for that.
For us, I'm not going to say it's a strategic plan that we have, but global sourcing isn't going away for us. You know, we're fortunate to have customers that we sell to in over 120 countries. I'm not too proud to say that we don't do everything service all of those customers all over the world from right here in Ohio. So if we have to look at leveraging these partnerships that we have in Europe and in UK, and like, we're going to continue to do that. I'm not going to look at bringing that to Ohio right now. It really wouldn't make sense for us.
We're a global company, and we've sourced our raw materials primarily in Europe, but it certainly comes from different countries within Europe. And also there are some components that are shipped to Europe from the United States that we use in our production, and also some materials that are coming from Asia. So little change for us as far as our global sourcing strategy.
Yeah, and Shade is a pretty small company. There's about 30 of us. So when it comes down to it, how we get our supplies and raw materials can't really change for what we can do, but maybe our suppliers themselves who we buy steel from, maybe they change where they source it. Maybe they also consider not going to Korea, or, maybe they find some other way to do it within the US. But ourselves, we're not really doing anything different.
Yeah. And Kristi, what is kind of your radius of work that you guys do? Are you primarily in home state, or will you guys go national with the work you do?
We're primarily in Arizona. We do venture to California, Texas, Las Vegas area, but not too much beyond that. Sometimes we ship out some DIY style stuff, but for the most part, we're out of Arizona and source everything as locally as we can.
Okay. Have you guys had the ability to collaborate? I know tent rental companies are similar, where they're kind of geographically located. So is there any collaboration that you guys have done across the awning sun shading groups at ATA to be able to kind of work together and help with some of that sourcing?
Yeah, we do talk to a lot of the suppliers there and recommend anybody who's looking for something that we don't do. We do a lot of custom shade sale jobs. That's really our bread and butter, custom shade sales. So if somebody's looking for an awning or a tent, it's nice to have those partnerships to be able to direct people to out of the ATA. So for sure.
Yeah. And on sourcing side, is there any collaboration to help people think about where some of the good sourcing is for components, or work together to try to get better pricing by pulling yourself together and saying, hey, we're bigger than just one of us?
Yeah, definitely. A lot of I mean, like, we don't do a ton of vinyl, but I've spoken to Brian about the material they have, and of course the other vendors there. And so it's helpful to know who you've got to work with and who's willing to be a partner and help you out, and for sure.
Great. All right, interesting question. So you have the ear of a policymaker. What would you ask them to change or improve, or what advice might you give them?
Oh, I would say, I think our industry has some great advocates that spend time on the Hill, and we should all feel fortunate that we have those. But I think we have to look at the textile industry as a whole. And that means different things to each one of us, right? And different things even outside of this group. But we've got to understand we want and need textiles in North America to be strong, but we also have to look at and understand that not all textiles are going to be made here in North America. And but I think, to your point, Tony, you had to buy a machine from Korea, I think you said, to bring to onshore so that you could do more manufacturing in North America, but yet you were still penalized by that. I wish that the lawmakers just understood that a lot of, whether it be equipment or whether it be raw goods, not all of that can truly be made in North America. And if we want to continue growth in North America, it can't be a bright line on tariffs imposed on anything coming in the door. There needs to be some type of lenience on some of these components, parts, machines, products coming in, if at the end of the day it's still bolstering the US economy.
If I had to grab a policymaker's ear, I'd, at least for my current situation of not having coated fabrics production within the United States, is berry compliance. There are some very unique materials out there that could be used in place of a berry compliant material. So really it would be able to source the most appropriate fabric for the application and be able to evaluate on a global scale what is best for either if it's a military project or just something that somebody deems to need berry compliance, if there's another material out there that would better suit their needs.
And nothing to add from my end. I think they hit on the hot points there.
So for me, mine's a little more pointed to Korea. So right now they're negotiating an agreement, but Korea, like many countries, have a free trade agreement, KORUS. KORUS was negotiated in 2012 by Congress to basically allow free cross-border trade. And so for a negotiation then to happen and asking for concessions, there really aren't concessions to give because we already agreed to something that is beneficial to both sides. So I'm going to get a little wonky here, but there have been some studies done on the elasticity of substitution. So a percent fall in imports or a percent fall in cost of imports, what does that lead to? And so the number is 2.5, right? So if you raise prices by 1%, you're going to see a reduction in international trade by 2.5%. And so a 25% tariff ends up reducing your trade potentially by 50 to 60%, right? And so if a goal is to increase tariffs, is to bring more money into the US, you're actually not able to do that. The shift in trade is actually higher than the increase in imports. And so it would just be good for more thought to be given towards that, talking to economists, trying to understand, putting some thought behind some of these policies, because then maybe you don't have that uncertainty. Maybe you can lock a number in, right? And not say, okay, August 1st, 2 days from now, it's going to be 25%. And then I bet a bunch of things get kicked down the road as well. So those would be my thoughts, my wonkish thoughts after reading some articles there.
I like what you're saying, Tony, and the other thing would be is if we could just make textile products free to trade, just rather than imposing tariffs or duties or anything. I know that Europe and Canada have a free trade agreement, so my Canadian customers I encourage to take direct shipments to avoid that now 15% tariff that is happening. So
Yeah. And one positive thing, and when you talk about policymakers and what ATA has done, is closing the de minimis loophole. Obviously, that's been big for a lot of people because there were companies who were skirting the duties and tariffs they needed to pay. And so that is one thing that I think we can all hang our hats on, be pretty proud about the work we did in Washington. So, what advice would you give to a small textile company just starting to think about global risks? A lot of us on here are larger companies, but we have a big group in ATA and probably sitting out there who is thinking about this, and they maybe have 5 people or 6 people, and everyone's wearing multiple hats. So, any advice?
I mean, Shade being a smaller company, it's global is sometimes out of our reach, right? But sometimes you can find suppliers overseas that really help you get a better price and be transparent with you. So it's just exploring what's out there, or talk to local suppliers who might already have a relationship that can help you build something too.
Yeah, and that's what we've done. I mentioned earlier we do bring one component in from China still. We've started talking to a lot of local companies to see if there was a way, based on our volume, we could get to some comparable pricing, and there are some options that are close. I'm going to plug ATA again because the ATA Expo, I will walk every single aisle and we'll talk to every single person, right? And so finding as many sources as you can, that is the one-stop shop to go in and find all the people who make buckles and clips and all the other things that go into your products. And I'd say having as many sources as possible so that you can have the conversations. And when you're negotiating, you have a little bit more leverage than them knowing, well, I'm your only source. So there's not a lot of negotiations that can go in here.
for me, if I'm recommending a small textile company, is how are you going to differentiate yourself and focus on what your customers' needs are and how you can offer them the best possible service if you don't have the most unique product out there, but definitely focus on that relationship and building your relationship in order to continue to secure business. And I've seen how that can spread like wildfire through the industry, that you get a good reputation and you just continue to offer a good level of service, and more customers will come your way.
And I think just reiterating off of some of that and what each one of us has talked about throughout this time is we all do business with those that we trust, right? And we're not willing to, in most cases, we're not willing to just change to save a few dollars because the cost of change costs more than that. So be a company with integrity, and people are going to do business with people they trust.
Absolutely. Brent, I'm going to step back to something you said earlier about COVID. I feel like COVID maybe gave some of us some learnings. I mean, I always try to find that silver lining. I feel like I blocked out those 3 years in my mind at this point. But with regards to this specific tariff related situation we're in, so is there any one thing you wish you had done differently when preparing for uncertainty? And then have there been any learnings that either came out of COVID or have come out of this experience that have benefited you?
Yeah, well, I think, oh, man, I think COVID made us all stronger, right? It was a trying time, obviously not just for our industry, but when you talk about, we're here talking about sourcing and international issues, right? That hit a major stumbling block during COVID. Many of us spend months a year overseas, and then all of a sudden you don't step on a plane to go abroad for 8 to 12 months. It just teaches you how to do business differently. And at the time, we can look back through COVID and when it was going on and just simply say, how are we getting through this? How are we going to survive? It was truly day by day. But I think managing an international business through COVID helps you with what we're dealing with right now. We have issues, right? There's things that are going on right now that are uncertain to us, and they're going to change again before we talk next time. But I think navigating through COVID just has given people more confidence to say, we're going to be okay. We're going to figure out a solution. We might not have the perfect plan today, but collaboratively, we're gonna figure this out as we go. So I think COVID just made us all a little bit more resilient, and I think we all got better at calling audibles, and that's what we're doing right now through all of this.
Yeah. Yeah. Tents, obviously, we 3x'd overnight. There was like a month period where I don't know, nobody's going to throw parties, and then everyone had to be outside. And so I think I bought 7 machines from you, Brent, during COVID. And I was in Ohio the day things started shutting down with Tim, your sales manager, and he actually drove me to Home Depot to buy masks because we were out of masks in Green Bay.
Yeah.
And then once COVID opened back up, we were at a show over in Europe together, and you guys were gracious enough to let me into a booth. And someone from Netherlands brought along COVID. And so we ended up with a super spreader event
We sure did.
within the Miller Group. I think you and Jeff Sponseller were the only two who survived that. Brian or Kristi, anything to add to the lessons you learned or anything you wish you had done differently preparing for this particular shock?
Touching on what COVID did is, I guess, SIOEN had just decided to go direct to the marketplace with our own distribution channel in North America, starting in 2019. So we got our kind of initial build-up year out of the way, and then everybody was grounded. So it certainly halted our progression as a group within North America. But it also allowed us to focus on the things that we needed to, like getting our warehouse set up properly, and that foundation has now progressed into, after almost 6 full years of going direct to the marketplace, enabled us to expand. So just prepared us for not knowing what was going to happen, but being able to react to the marketplace and adapt. So the supply chain issues that happened, we started kind of overloading some of our stock, much to our CEO's distaste. But hey, it all goes out the door eventually. So it all ends up getting sold, which is a good thing.
Sales guys always give that answer. I get it. As much inventory as we can.
Yeah.
Don't you worry.
Just send the containers over. That's all I'm saying.
Brent's cringing with the working capital impacts of that.
Oh, so is my CEO.
Yeah. Anything you wish you had done differently heading up to this particular situation, or do you feel like you guys kind of had a handle further up?
Oh, there's no way to tell. If I had done things differently, I may have lost some business along the way. I'd like to think that being able to adapt and just keep the communication lines open with customers allows us to continue to operate as well as we are.
This has been a super valuable conversation. I want to thank you guys for all sharing your insights and experience. For ATA members listening, if you want to learn more or join conversations like this, be sure to check out ATA's supply chain resources and webinars. And thanks for tuning in. We'll see you on the next episode. Thank you for joining us for this episode of ATA Talking Textiles. ATA is a nonprofit association representing the international specialty fabrics marketplace. Learn more about the events, workshops, and webinars ATA hosts throughout the year at textiles.org/events.